Hey guys, so your girl got lost this morning heading to breakfast, so I figured, business as usual. So I figured I would use this opportunity to create a video for you guys because we got a long walk today. So I have received a lot of messages regarding commuting as a flight attendant. Now, I was really hesitant to make this video because technically I'm not a commuter. Commuting, in order to be considered a commuter, it usually means that you live outside a base. And since I live in Phoenix, doesn't really qualify me as a commuter. However, I have noticed that lately I have started picking up a lot of trips out of base. Perfect example of the trip that I'm on right now. You guys, check out this amazing view. I am currently in Kona, Hawaii, and I picked this up. Hi guys. And I picked this trip up out of Oakland, and so I commuted into Oakland from Phoenix the other day. And I've actually done this a couple of times. I picked up trips out of LAX. I picked up trips out of Las Vegas. So even though I'm not a permanent commuter, I feel like at this point I can speak to the commuter policy because I've definitely experienced it. So for those of you guys who are completely green to aviation and don't have no idea what a commuter policy is or what a commuter is to begin with, let's go ahead and start there. So as far as a commuter is concerned, you are considered a commuter if you live more than 2 hours outside of your base. Now, how you choose to commute is up to you. Some people commute because they drive. For example, there's a girl who's in our base. She's Phoenix based, but she lives in Tucson, which is more than 2 hours away from the Phoenix airport. So technically she's a commuter. Or we have people who live in, San Diego, and they commute into Phoenix. So that would make you a commuter, okay? Now, as far as Southwest is concerned, we do not have any policies that prevent you from working at Southwest while being a commuter. In short, Southwest doesn't care where you live as long as you get your ass to work on time. Which brings us to the commuter policy. So if you are going to be working for Southwest and you are going to be based outside of base and you are going to need to commute, Southwest is literally the best airline to do that with because we have the best commuter policy in the industry. So now let's talk a little bit about what our commuter policy entails. So you have two options when you're commuting on Southwest. The first option is commuting on your own metal, which is your own airline. So that would be commuting on Southwest. So if you commute on Southwest, Southwest policy is you have to list and present for one flight that would get you into your domicile 2 hours prior to the start of your shift, okay? List, report, and stay basically until that plane pushes back from the gate. If for some reason you list and present for a flight and it does not, you don't either A, get on that flight, B, that flight is delayed, or C, that flight is oversold, you are covered under the commuter policy, which means you do not receive a write-up, you do not receive an occurrence, you do not receive any disciplinary action at all, okay? The second option is to commute on another airline. So you commute off of your metal, which means, let's say you work for Southwest and you commute on American. Back to the example of the girl who I was telling you about who lives in Tucson. Now, I used to work for American, and I know that American is one of the only airlines that has flights that fly from Tucson to Phoenix multiple times a day. So in her instance, if she was going to commute in and fly from Tucson, she would be covered under the commuter policy on another airline. What that looks like is you have to list and present for 2 flights that would get you into your domicile 2 hours prior to the start of your shift, okay? Now, those two flights can be on two different airlines. So you could list on, say, American and JetBlue, as long as both of them would get you in 2 hours prior to the start of your shift. Or you can list on one airline, but consecutive flights. So let's say your shift starts at 10 o'clock in the morning. Your very first flight that you list for would have to, or one of the flights that you list for would have to get you in 2 hours prior. So you would have to take you'd have to have a flight that gets you in at 8 o'clock in the morning. Then on top of that, because you're on the same airline, you would have to list for the flight prior to that. So maybe that flight is 6 o'clock in the morning. So your first time that you list and present may be for 6 a.m. Your last opportunity to list and present would be for the 8 o'clock, which would get you in 2 hours prior. You're not required to do that. You can stick to Southwest and only do one flight a day, and that's what a lot of people do. But if you're in an area that's not serviced by Southwest, then you definitely want to consider listing on another airline. Okay, so now let's talk about commuting internationally or from hard to reach destinations. I've had a couple of you guys reach out to me who live in Hawaii, and you were asking if it's possible to commute from Hawaii while you are on probation. The answer is yes. So again, you can use the commuter policy. Number one, Southwest flies to Hawaii, so you could definitely commute in on your own metal. The other option is we do have cabin agreements with Hawaiian Airlines and a couple other airlines that fly in to Hawaii. The other cool thing that is really popular with Southwest is people who live in Hawaii. They will stay in Hawaii because the way our trips are built, I think I had a video where I talked about legs, and if you guys didn't see it, I'll post it somewhere up here so that you guys can go back and watch it so that you understand what legs are and how they make up a trip. But how our trips are built for Hawaii in general, like for example, on this trip, I flew from Oakland to Honolulu, Honolulu to Kona. Now, a lot of the times, your second day, those trips are usually 3 and 4 days. So on day 2 and day 3, you're usually flying legs back and forth between the Big Island and Kona, or the Big Island and Maui. So you may do 5, 6, 7 legs in one day. So what a lot of times people will do is they will pick up that trip and then they will give away the inner island legs to the people who actually live in Hawaii, because they already live here, they already have housing, they already have transportation. And then for you, it's an advantage because you get to keep the hotel, because in essence, they usually don't need it. And you get to spend some time, extra time in Hawaii. So if it's a 4-day trip, you usually work the first trip in and the last trip out, and then the 2 days in between, you give away to somebody who lives in Hawaii. They work the inner islands, you keep the hotel. Now, mind you, don't get to keep the per diem because they keep that. And you also usually lose the rigs. So it's not a trip that you're gonna make a lot of money on, but if it's a trip that you actually just wanna hang out in Hawaii, that's definitely an option. If you are a commuter and you live in Hawaii, you definitely want to join those Facebook groups so that you can pick up those inner island legs, okay? The next question I got asked is for people who live internationally. Can you commute internationally while working for Southwest and while on probation? Yes and no. So yes, it is possible. I actually just met a girl the other day who's been with the company for 7 years, and she commutes in from Japan. Y'all, bless her entire soul, because it could not be me, okay? The main reason I got this job is because I did want to be nomadic and I want to live internationally, but I don't know about commuting from Japan. That's crazy. The only way, so she said she does it 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So she blocks her trips and she's not flying back and forth every week. So she comes in, she spends 2 weeks here in a crash pad, and she flies her, well, actually, no, she wouldn't even have to do the crash pad because you're flying the whole time. So you actually wouldn't need a place to stay as long as you're not doing it on reserve. That is, you definitely have to have a line. So if you've got a line for 2 weeks, then you can work for 2 weeks straight. And then at the end of your 2 weeks, then you fly back to Japan, or she flies back to Japan, and then she lives there. Or you can do 1 month on and 1 month off. If you do 1 month on, then yeah, you're probably going to need a crash pad for at least a couple days, because legally we're only legal to fly, I believe, 6 days. So you would have to at least get a crash pad or a hotel for one of those days, okay? So that is a possibility. Now, the reason I say that it's a possibility to do it, but not necessarily a possibility to do it on probation, is because she's doing it taking advantage of what we call our Z agreements. Now, Z agreements are agreements that we have. They're different from cabin agreements because they cover international travel. Cabin agreements do not cover international travel. They cover domestic travel, Hawaii, and some of the islands. I think like Jamaica, like the U.S., I forgot what they're called, like the U.S. islands or whatever those, the popular ones. So you can do that. But as far as like international travel, those benefits do not kick in until 6 months and 1 day. Then you get your Z benefits. And at that point, you can basically Z or non-rev on pretty much any airline. I will say, coming from American, I will be the first one to tell you, Southwest has some of the best Z agreements I've ever seen in my entire life. We literally have almost every airline. I can't think of an airline that we do not have a Z agreement with. And how Z agreements work is you only pay the taxes on those trips. Now, international taxes can get expensive. For example, now get expensive I understand that it's still practically free, but you do still have to pay something. It's not 100% free. So, for example, I just went to Cancun for my birthday, and for me to fly round trip from Arizona to Cancun and back, it was $136. Cheap? Absolutely. Way cheaper than if I were to buy a ticket. However, it's still money that you have to pay, and it adds up. That's also one of the cheaper Z agreements. If you're living in a place like London, I know to non-rev or to Z into London Heathrow is something insane like $300 one way. That gets pricey if you're talking about doing that a couple times a month because you live there. Now, if you were to pick some place where the cost of living offsets the cost of what it costs to pay for the Z trips, then so be it, okay? But to have to pay that on a consistent basis, before you consider doing that, it's definitely something that you're going to need to get your ducks in a row about, and it's not something that I would risk doing while you're on probation. You already have so many things on your plate while you're on probation, and there's so many things that can go wrong while you're on probation. I personally would not consider internationally commuting while on probation, even if you can afford it and you decide that you want to pay for your tickets outright for the first 6 months. I just wouldn't risk it. On the flip side, if you did decide to do that, just know that you would be covered under the commuter policy as long as you were paying for a ticket that had you arrive into your base 2 hours prior to your report time, okay? Now, let's have a conversation about flying into your state, but not necessarily flying into your base. So you may be thinking to yourself, okay, that's cool, which it is. I'm not going to knock it. I'll just go ahead and commute. That is fine as long as you're not sitting reserve. Where it gets kind of sticky as a commuter is when you're sitting reserve, because keep in mind, we work 3 days on, 4 days off. So you have a 3-day reserve block that runs 12 hours long. That can be from let's say you get AM reserve, 3 a.m. to 3 p.m., okay? So if your available time or your first point of contact is at 3 a.m. and you have to be in base 2 hours prior, that means you need to be on a flight that's going to get you in at 1 o'clock in the morning. That also means you're going to be sitting in some crew lounge not knowing whether you're going to be used or not. So to get on a plane, fly all the way to work, sit in base, and not know if you get used or not, and then let the whole day go by, 12 hours, only to discover that you did not get used, hop on a plane, fly back home if there's flights available, because keep in mind, flights don't fly 24 hours a day. Some airports, like example, in California, they have curfews. So you may not necessarily be able to get a flight in or get a flight out all the time. Now imagine doing that 3 times in a row for your 3-day reserve block and then not getting used at all. So my recommendation is, if you're going to commute, you better figure out a way to block your shifts, so that you just work like 6 days straight. And so you plan on staying in base for 6 days and then maybe take a week off and you're at home, then 6 days back. Or some people block 2 weeks and 2 weeks, where you're in base for 2 weeks and then you're gone for 2 weeks. Now, as far as commuting on other airlines, we do have what are called cabin agreements, which pretty much give you the opportunity to, in essence, jump seat. But since you're not really jump seat, because you can't jump seat on somebody else's metal, you can only jump seat on the airline you work for. So we have cabinet agreements with pretty much all of the major airlines. So American, United, Delta, JetBlue. I believe we have Frontier and Spirit, Sun Country, Hawaiian. So we pretty much have a lot of options to choose from. Okay, so for some of those of you guys who live in areas that have co-terminals, for example, let's say you live in California and you happen to live in Los Angeles. Well, if you're familiar with Los Angeles, you know that there are several different airports in California. You've got Burbank, you've got Long Beach, you've got Santa Ana, John Wayne, you've got Ontario, you've got San Diego. You've got a lot of different options. Unfortunately, none of that matters when you're commuting and you're working for Southwest, because Southwest only has one base in California, in Southern California, and that's LAX. So when you are, say, based in LAX and that is your domicile, the only airport you can commute into and be covered under the commuter policy is LA. So don't think because you live in, Chicago and you're going to commute into LA and you think, if things get tight, I'll just fly into Long Beach and then I'll take the train, or I'll take an Uber, or I'll fly into Santa Ana, or I'll fly into Burbank. Granted, you can do that, and it is definitely a benefit and an asset, but just know if you do that, you are doing so at your own risk and you are not covered under the commuter policy. So if you were to fly into, say, from Chicago Midway and you were to fly into Long Beach and you do not arrive 2 hours prior, and for some reason you are late getting to your gate to report, they're not going to cover you under the commuter policy. You're going to get an occurrence, and because they do not play about not being in base at your assigned time, you're more than likely going to get fired, especially if you're on probation. That is the one thing the union will tell you about. The one thing that they cannot protect you from is not being in base during your assigned shift. My suggestion to you is, if you're going to utilize those co-terminals, utilize them by flying in the day before. Or if you are working a PM shift, utilize them by flying in on the first flight, second flight of the day, because while they are convenient, it's not going to protect you from the commuter policy and you will get fired. Okay? So I hope that answered your guys' questions that you have about commuting. Also, if you're commuting on other airlines, because I know this is a question that you're probably going to ask, if you're commuting on us, Southwest, obviously it's free. You don't have to pay for it. If you are commuting on other airlines domestically, it's also free. You do not have to pay for it. Keep in mind, though, the commuter policy on Southwest and the commuter policy on other airlines are only valid for you. So only you as the flight attendant can fly and use the commuter policy on other airlines. Now, as you know, you do get Z agreements that you can use for other airlines. Z agreements, this is where it gets kind of confusing. Z agreements and cabin agreements are essentially the same if you as a flight attendant are flying on your own. So you can commute on your own personal time, and you can take advantage of those benefits of flying on other airlines. I know that was a huge disadvantage for me when I was a customer service rep at American. I had to wait 6 months and 1 day in order to fly on any other airline outside of American. As a flight attendant, those benefits and that privilege kicks in from day one, as long as only you are using it. So even if you're not commuting, if let's say you decide you want to fly to Atlanta for the day to go get your hair done, you can use the commuter, the cabin agreements that we have, and you can fly those for free. And you don't have to pay the taxes. As a flight attendant, there is zero reasons for you to ever have to Zed on a domestic airline if it's just you flying by yourself. Just use the counter or the cabin agreement that we have and fly for free. At the end of the day, it's still going to be standby. It's not going to change your listing as far as where you are on the list. So do not ever book a Zed agreement domestically if it is just you flying as a flight attendant. Always use a cabin agreement, okay? As far as the cabin agreements are concerned, you want to familiarize yourself with the process of booking those, because each airline is different. Some airlines require you to make a reservation on an industry website that we have. I'm not gonna list the name of the website because your girl's still on probation and I'm not trying to get fired, and I don't know if that's proprietary or not. So we do have a couple of industry websites where you can log on, enter your credentials, and you can book yourself your commuter flight. Or some of the airlines require you to list at the gate. So you arrive, you show up, you go to the gate, you show your badge, and then they'll list you right then and there for the flight, okay? I think that pretty much covers it. If you guys have any questions at all regarding the commuter policy, feel free to leave a comment down below and I will answer those questions for you. Until then, I hope you guys found this video useful. Make sure to leave me a like, a comment, and also make sure to subscribe. My goal, you guys, is to get this channel monetized. If you're watching this on YouTube, my goal is to get this channel monetized by December. In order to do that, I need 5,000 watch hours, and right now I am halfway there, and I literally just started this channel a month and a half ago. So you guys are already showing up and showing out for me, and I totally appreciate that. So if you know somebody who's going through the hiring process right now with Southwest or even another airline, or they're just interested in what it's like being a flight attendant, please, please, please make sure to share my video so that I can get my watch time up. I really appreciate it. Also, if you feel so inclined, there's a link down below to my Cash App, my Venmo, and feel free to buy me a cup of coffee. Your girl loves Starbucks. So that is a nice way of saying thank you for creating these videos for you guys, because believe it or not, they do take time and editing them is not easy. So yeah, I've already taken away, like, I don't know, 35 minutes out of my time here in beautiful Hawaii to make this video for you guys. So if you guys can show your appreciation by like, comment, and sharing, or buying me a cup of coffee down below, I'd really appreciate it. Until then, see you on the jump seat. Bye.